Welcome to version 3 of my history of Sony Pictures Television. This time I am going to narrate it all the way from the studio's humble beginnings in 1947. I'd just like to take you through the legend first. Anything in a blue box is a distinct corporate entity which will usually end with Inc., LLC or Limited. Anything in a green box is a legally recognized trading name used by a person, company or more than one company. Anything in a red box is either an internal corporate division referred to in company literature but nothing else, or a brand name used on screen that isn't a legally recognized trading name. The black writing is the line of business in which a particular company is involved. So anyway, without any further ado, let's get to the rest of the video. The history of Sony Pictures Television essentially began in 1947 with a television commercial production firm known as Pioneer Films, set up by Ralph M. Cohn. There's not really much to say here, except that Ralph Cohn happened to be the nephew of Harry Cohn, who was in charge of Columbia Pictures. With the Cohns being infamous for nepotism, as was the norm in the industry at the time, it was therefore no surprise that Pioneer Films was acquired by Columbia Pictures just 1 year later in 1948. The company was incorporated as Screen Gems Inc. in New York, a name borrowed from Columbia's dormant cartoon subsidiary in California, which had grown out of Margaret Winkler's distribution firm many years previously. The newly incorporated wholly owned subsidiary of Columbia Pictures Corporation continued to produce television commercials for the next 3 years. In Sony's PR, Screen Gems is often glorified as the first television studio established by a major Hollywood studio. However, as I've just explained, Columbia didn't actually establish Screen Gems in 1948, they merely acquired it. It also seems to gloss over Paramount Television Productions, which was formed around the same time by a rival studio to oversee and program the ill-fated Paramount Television Network. This would have been a full TV studio rather than a commercial producer like Screen Gems. Anyway, now that I've all but debunked this piece of Sony lore, let's move on. 1951 was the year in which Screen Gems became a fully fledged television studio. It moved into the new and lucrative field of telefilm syndication and started producing its own television series in 1952. It began using an animated logo at this point. There was still a mentality in Hollywood at this point that movie studios shouldn't be involved in this new threatening medium of television. Sound familiar? Anyway, as if the viewers at home gave two hoots about this, the Screen Gems logo used at this time was designed to conceal the connection to Columbia Pictures. Stars shining inside a TV tube gave no apparent symbolic link to the parent company, but did firmly emphasize that Screen Gems was a television studio. The full corporate name was given to show that the studio was a distinct corporate entity. Programs are billed as being either a Screen Gems Inc. production or presentation, depending on whether or not Screen Gems had produced the show itself. In 1954, the word film was added to the logo to emphasize that the shows were pre-recorded and transmitted on film, which was still something of a novelty back then. 1955 was the year when the Hollywood studios decided to stop being ridiculously covert about their involvement in television, except ironically Paramount, which seemed to go in the opposite direction around this time. As such, August saw the introduction of a new Screen Gems logo, rendering the Columbia Torch Lady in all her glory. The wording was the same, sans the word Inc. The byline television subsidiary Columbia Pictures Corporation was added in a newfound zeal to acknowledge the parent company. The next year saw further integration with Columbia, with Screen Gems finally syndicating its parent's feature films. Screen Gems also acquired another syndication company, Serials Inc., also known as Hygo Television Films, which held syndication rights to a very impressive library of film and television. In September, there was an interstate merger between the television company, incorporated in New York, the dormant cartoon company that I mentioned earlier, which was incorporated in California, and Serials Inc. The newly combined entity retained the name used by two of its predecessors, was incorporated in California, and issued 89% of its stock to Columbia Pictures. In 1957, Screen Gems made another investment. It acquired a 20% stake in a startup television animation studio, HB Enterprises Inc., founded by Bill Hanna and Joe Barbara, former producers at the freshly shut down MGM Cartoon Studio. This investment included a 10-year deal whereby Screen Gems would distribute the HP Studios output. This year also saw the creation of Briskin Productions Inc., an entity under the management of studio veteran Irving Briskin, set up to run Screen Gems production operations at Columbia Pictures Studio on Gower Street, Hollywood. In 1958, Screen Gems celebrated the 10th anniversary of its incorporation in New York, and seemingly temporarily did away with the distinction between film production and film presentation. This year also saw a subtle alteration to the HP Enterprises logo, as well as the death of Harry Cohn from a heart attack. Columbia Pictures expanded into music this year, with Colpix Records, a recording company, set up as a division of Columbia Pictures Corporation, and SG Music Corporation, a publishing company, set up as a subsidiary of Screen Gems. In 1959, Screen Gems returned to the production of television commercials by acquiring Elliott, Unger and Elliott Inc. This company was integrated as a division called EUE/Screen Gems. Columbia itself also expanded into broadcasting via a new subsidiary, Columbia Pictures Electronics Company Inc. Also, in 1959, HP Enterprises changed its name to the more widely recognized Hanna-Barbera Productions Inc. In 1960, Screen Gems was reincorporated in Delaware and continued to have 89% of its stock owned by Columbia Pictures. Shortly before this change came a new logo, simply placing the company name around the Torch Lady's legs with no extra qualifying information. This information was usually instead supplied as a voiceover.
This has been a Screen Gems film production from the Hollywood studios of Columbia Pictures.
In 1961, the 11% of Screen Gems stock that hadn't been issued to Columbia was floated on the stock market. A new subsidiary was established, Audience Studies Inc., to test market television programs and commercials. At first, it serviced only Screen Gems and its divisions, but eventually branched out into the lucrative business of providing its services to other companies. This year also saw Screen Gems branching out into television broadcasting. 1963 saw the consolidation of many Columbia businesses under the Screen Gems banner. SG Music Corporation was merged with Columbia's other music publishing ventures to create Screen Gems Columbia Music Inc., a New York corporation jointly owned by Columbia and Screen Gems. Columbia Pictures Electronics merged with Screen Gems Broadcasting Operations as Screen Gems Broadcasting Corporation, a subsidiary of Screen Gems. As well as that, Briskin Productions was folded back into Screen Gems. Later in that year, the ever-majestic Torch Lady was impeached as Screen Gems' corporate logo in favor of a weird animation with dancing lines and flashing circles. A voiceover continued to differentiate between production and presentation.
A Screen Gems production.
This may have coincided with Columbia Pictures decreasing its stake in Screen Gems to 88.64%. In 1965, Screen Gems changed its logo yet again. The new logo involved a Latin letter S forming itself from a cheaply animated film reel, quite possibly a nod to the emphasis on the word film in previous logos. Its structure may also have been a veiled reference to that of the Torch Lady used by Columbia Pictures at the same time, with the red dot representing torchlight. Nevertheless, this logo has gained a great deal of infamy over the years, taking on such fond appellations as the S from Hell, thanks in no small part to Eric Seday's cheap synthesizer music. This may once again have coincided with Columbia Pictures decreasing its stake in Screen Gems, this time to 87.1%. With the separation of the affairs of Columbia and Screen Gems, Colpix Records was no longer enough to exploit Columbia's full value on the music side of things, so it was replaced in 1966 by Col Gems Records Inc., which, as the name suggested, was a 50-50 joint venture between Columbia and Screen Gems. Most notably, it released music recorded by the Monkees, who also had a television presence thanks to Screen Gems. Its manufacturing and distribution was handled by RCA Records. Another venture involving the Monkees was Interplanetary Licensing and Merchandising Inc., which licensed their brand for use on lunchboxes and other such things. Between 1966 and 1967, Columbia's shareholding in Screen Gems decreased to 86.9%. At the start of 1967, the Screen Gems Hanna-Barbera deal expired and was not renewed. Instead, Hanna-Barbera was acquired outright by the Taft Broadcasting Company, thus ending its association with Columbia in every way. In 1968, the trend of separation made a complete about-turn, with Columbia and Screen Gems merging into a single entity. This involved Columbia Pictures paying a lot to Screen Gems shareholders in both cash and stock. Almost all the two companies' non-music subsidiaries became divisions of a new diversified media company, Columbia Pictures Industries Inc., incorporated in New York. This year also saw the establishment of a new record label, SGC Records, a division of Screen Gems Columbia Music. The manufacturing and distribution for this label was handled by Atlantic Records. 1969 saw more changes on the music side of things. Columbia Pictures Industries acquired Bell Records Inc., and the two companies were soon merged into a new Columbia Pictures Industries, incorporated in Delaware. Colgems Records, still a distinct entity, established its own publishing company, Colgems Music Corporation. In 1970, following the reincorporation of Columbia Pictures Industries in Delaware, the Screen Gems jingle was shortened, removing the 3 staccato notes. In 1971, SGC Records and Colgems Records were both shut down, but Screen Gems Columbia Music and Colgems Music continued as music publishing companies. In 1972, Audience Studies Inc. was sold off. As well as that, Columbia Pictures Industries merged its studios with those of Warner Brothers to form the Burbank Studios, which I thought I should mention even though I haven't seen fit to actually show it in the diagram. In 1973, the animated logos for Columbia divisions took on the byline, a division of Columbia Pictures Industries Inc., in line with the names used on copyright notices. Late 1974 saw quite a bit of reorganization at Columbia Pictures Industries. A new record company was formed known as Arista Records Inc. The operations of Bell Records, along with any holdings left over from Colpix, Colgems and SGC, were folded into the new label. More importantly, since this video is about television, Screen Gems production and distribution operations were reorganized under the name Columbia Pictures Television, which used a new logo loosely based on the S. It appears to have been a placeholder logo. Screen Gems broadcasting operations, on the other hand, became part of the main corporation. In 1975, Columbia Pictures Industries started selling off some of its broadcasting operations. It also introduced a new print logo, a semi-hexacosagram in a semicircle, representing the light from the lady's torch, rather than the torch itself as the previous print logo had done. It has become known as the Sunburst. EUE/Screen Gems started using this as its logo as well. In June 1976, a full animated version of the Sunburst debuted on the film Murder by Death. It used a still shot of the previous logo, combined with brand new visual effects by Robert Abel, with music by Suzanne Ciani. A short television version soon followed. Columbia Pictures Industries instituted a color code for its divisions at this point. Film was blue, television was orange. There were some divestments in August, including a television station and Columbia's music publishing subsidiaries. Screen Gems Columbia Music, renamed to Screen Gems EMI Music Inc., and Colgems Music Corporation, renamed to Colgems EMI Music Inc., were sold to the UK record label EMI. 1977 saw Columbia's exit from the broadcasting business as it sold its last station. Interplanetary Licensing and Merchandising was renamed to International Marketing I Limited. In 1979, Columbia finally exited the music industry, selling Arista Records to Ariola, a Bertelsmann division which would later be the foundation for BMG. Ironically, BMG would later merge with Sony Music in 2004. On the television side, Columbia acquired TOY Productions, formerly Bud Yorkin Productions, and maintained it briefly as a subsidiary. 1980 saw the folding of TOY into Columbia Pictures Television, as well as the acquisition of Raystar Films from Ray Stark, who had previously sold his older films to Columbia in 1974. This company included Raystar Features Inc. and Raystar Television Inc. In June 1981, Columbia Pictures did away with the Sunburst logo, instead experimenting with something thematically similar but with significantly different animation. A television version didn't come until later. Then, in August, Time Life Films, the film and television arm of Time Inc., was sold to Columbia Pictures Industries and folded into Columbia Pictures Television. In June of 1982, Columbia Pictures Industries was bought by the Coca-Cola Company for cash and stock worth $1.025 billion via a new subsidiary, Coca-Cola Pictures Inc. Straight afterwards, Coke incorporated an entity called CPT Holdings Inc., again in Delaware. The purpose of this entity was to take over the rights holding of old Columbia Pictures television shows, mostly from the Screen Gems days. Following this, the new version of The Torch Lady, introduced in 1981, finally got a television version using a subtly altered version of Suzanne Ciani's music from the previous logo. It sported a byline announcing the company's new ownership, which, in combination with the music that sounds like soda pouring, created a strong association between this logotype and Coke, even though it had really been devised a year before the association between the companies. It is also noteworthy that the color coding was preserved with these new logos. The text and part of the lady's robe were blue on the movie logo and gold or orange on the television logo. In September, Columbia Pictures Industries was merged into Coca-Cola Pictures, which took on the same name. In May 1983, an extra subsidiary of Raystar Television was formed, known as Raystar Productions, Inc. Then, in August, EUE/Screen Gems was spun off as a New York corporation called EUE/Screen Gems Limited. It was sold to longtime executive George Cooney and took with it the Screen Gems S trademark. In 1984, Coke decided to demerge Columbia Pictures and Columbia Pictures Television. Columbia Pictures Industries retained the film division, but the television division was transferred in its entirety to CPT Holdings. As such, because this is a television video, Columbia Pictures Industries will no longer appear. This reorganization was carried out as part of the establishment of a new television group. One of the units of this group was, of course, Raystar Television, but there are also a few new ones. Distribution rights to shows from the Screen Gems days were transferred into Colex Enterprises, a new partnership with LBS Communications, formerly Lexington Broadcasting Services. Another arm of the group was the Television Program Source, a new distribution company which was a joint venture between CPT, Alan Bennett, and Robert King. Coca-Cola increased its television operations significantly in June of the next year with the acquisition of Norman Lear's company, Embassy Communications Inc. This included Embassy Television and Tandem Productions, both production companies, Embassy Telecommunications, a distribution company, Embassy Films Associates, a feature film company, and its home video division, Embassy Home Entertainment. The immediate effects of this sale were the addition of a Coca-Cola byline to the Embassy Telecom logo and the shutdown of Tandem Productions, turning it into an in-name-only unit called Tandem Licensing Corporation. Its production operations were folded into Embassy Television. Coke also set up Embassy Pay Television, a division of Embassy Communications, for syndication to premium cable networks. On May 5th, 1986, a lot of reorganization happened. Embassy Television and Telecommunications, along with Tandem, were folded into Embassy Communications, which went from being a holding company to a full television company. Merv Griffin Enterprises was also acquired. It comprised 3 distinct companies, which were Jeopardy Productions, in charge of Jeopardy, Californ Productions, in charge of Wheel of Fortune, and Anthony Productions, in charge of Dance Fever. Around the same time, Embassy Films Associates was sold off to the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. Then, on November 24th, CPT's and Embassy's production operations were merged under the name Columbia Embassy Television, but they continued to operate as separate entities. The distribution operations of CPT were merged with the television program source, which became wholly owned by Columbia Embassy. Raystar Productions was folded back in as a division of Raystar Television under the new studio. On January 8, 1987, Coke reorganized its television operations into a new group called Coca-Cola Television Operations. It consisted of 3 main divisions, which were Columbia Embassy Television, Merv Griffin Enterprises, and Coca-Cola Telecommunications, the newly reincorporated Columbia Television Program Source Distribution Combine. February 23rd saw the formation of another new entity, CC Telecommunications Productions Inc., to handle first-run syndication production for Coca-Cola Telecommunications. In September, Dance Fever ended, so Anthony Productions was shut down. In December, Coca-Cola Television Operations, as well as Columbia Pictures Industries, was moved under TriStar Pictures, which was reorganized in a stock swap as Columbia Pictures Entertainment, with Coke holding an 80% stake. On January 1st, 1988, Columbia Embassy Television was renamed to Columbia Pictures Television, with Embassy Communications becoming a limited partnership called ELP Communications, in name only, under the newly reorganized division. Coca-Cola Telecommunications became Columbia Pictures Television Distribution as the Colex partnership with LBS was dissolved. However, Columbia and LBS continued to co-distribute many former Colex shows over the next few years. Merv Griffin Enterprises continued to operate as it had previously. Over the next few days, the logos were updated to reflect this reorganization, with Embassy's logo disappearing on January 2nd and CPT's byline being changed on January 4th with some new music to boot. On the latter date, TriStar Television, a division of Columbia Pictures Entertainment, was folded into Columbia Pictures Television, but its name and logo continued to appear on shows that were recorded but not yet aired. It was around this time that Coke decreased its stake from 80% to 49%. Merv Griffin Enterprises continued to use a Coca-Cola byline until February 8th, which is understandable, considering that CC Television Operations was still technically the parent of the group. TriStar Television's logo continued to appear until around March. Its disappearance may have been timed to coincide with the incorporation of a new TriStar Pictures unit on February 23rd. In July, the reorganization was made official. Columbia Pictures Television, Coca-Cola Television Operations, TriStar Television, and Columbia Pictures Television Distribution merged into a new entity using the Columbia name. The Coca-Cola name was now purged from the operation, with Columbia Pictures Television Distribution being the only subdivision of the new entity. The shows formerly produced by TriStar continued to be distributed by Televentures, a joint venture between Columbia Pictures Entertainment, Stephen J. Cannell Productions, and With/Thomas/Harris Productions. It was also around this time that Columbia formed its own international production and distribution arm, Columbia Pictures International Television. This was not a distinct entity, but operated out of the regional offices of other internationally operating Columbia divisions, hence the green box. January 1989 saw a reanimation of the Columbia Pictures Television logo, using footage from the 1981 movie logo. While it was an extremely cheap and cheesy looking job, it seemed to get the point across that the Columbia Pictures no longer referred to Columbia Pictures Industries, but to Columbia Pictures Entertainment, so the old color coding scheme no longer applied. In September, Sony Corporation of America acquired Coke's 49% stake in Columbia Pictures Entertainment. Then, in November, they bought out the other 51%. Straight after that, they acquired Goober Peters Television Inc., or the Goober Peters Entertainment Company, formerly Barris Industries. It became a subsidiary of Columbia Pictures Television. This also had two syndication divisions, which were Goober Peters Program Sales and Goober Peters Advertising Sales, and it was mostly involved in producing game shows. On July 11, 1990, Televentures was dissolved, resulting in the distribution rights to many of its shows reverting to Columbia Pictures Television Distribution. Then, in November, Goober Peters Program and Advertising Sales were folded into Columbia Pictures Television Distribution. Its production operations continued in a limited fashion into December. In late 1991, a few things happened. Columbia Pictures Entertainment was renamed to Sony Pictures Entertainment, and in keeping with this, its television operations were reorganized under a new group called Sony Television Entertainment. This was an internal corporate division, though its name was never used on screen. The hyphen was also dropped from the name of TriStar Pictures, and a new television studio was founded with that name, built from assets that Sony acquired from New World Television. This, along with Merv Griffin Enterprises, started operating under the umbrella of Sony Television Entertainment with a high degree of autonomy. John Feldheimer ran the new studio, continuing his role from New World Television. In December, the Goober Peters Entertainment Company produced one last TV movie, Christmas on Division Street, then was folded into Columbia Pictures Television. In 1992, the byline, a Sony Pictures Entertainment Company, was added to all three studios' logos. In the case of Columbia and TriStar, this also meant the unveiling of totally new logos, which were painted by Michael Diaz and Alan Rengold respectively. In 1993, another logo was painted by Michael Diaz for Sony, this time for Merv Griffin Enterprises. The Columbia and TriStar logos also got new music. At another point during this year, the in-name-only Columbia Pictures Television division of CPT Holdings was folded into the main Columbia Pictures Television studio. More reorganization happened in 1994. On February 21st, the three production studios were brought under the umbrella of a new division, Columbia TriStar Television, again run by John Feldheimer. They still operated as very much separate studios, but management became more consolidated. At the same time, Columbia Pictures Television Distribution began to be referred to internally as Columbia TriStar Television Distribution, but the old name continued to be used legally and on-screen for the time being. On June 4th, Merv Griffin Enterprises was folded into the new division, but its logo continued to appear until July 22nd. Then, in September, a logo was introduced for Columbia TriStar Television. 1995 saw more changes. John Feldheimer was promoted to head of Sony Television Entertainment, which ceased to exist shortly after. Sony's television operations were reorganized as the Columbia TriStar Television Group. As part of this change, Columbia Pictures International Television became Columbia TriStar International Television and started using its name on screen for the first time in a new animated logo. The production studios continued operating in the same way, albeit with a reduced degree of separation from the distribution company. It was also around this time that an alternate jingle was introduced for TriStar Television. On July 12, 1996, the production studios were further consolidated, now operating under the auspices of a new centralized production company, Columbia TriStar Television Inc. ELP and CPT now operated directly under this company and name instead of Columbia Pictures Television. While this is hard to represent on the diagram due to the nitty-gritty of the corporate structure, Columbia Pictures Television was actually a sub-studio of this new unit. At the same time, Columbia TriStar Television Distribution finally became the legal